Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome along to Big Little Small Talk. You're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. I've got a guest here today and I'm going to get him to introduce himself and state his title.
That's my title. That's very fancy. My name is Nick Carr. I'm a Toowoomba local, a comedian, a comedy promoter, and a property valuer. I have many titles.
Well, Nick, the reason I wanted you to introduce yourself is because I know you in the capacity of being a comedian and an organiser of comedy shows here in Toowoomba. But I wanted to know whether you'd made that leap into believing that that's what you are, a full-time person.
Yeah, I suppose. Like I suppose for so long I was just doing valuation, but I've never really identified with that. That was just a job. Like, it's always just been a job. Like, I never really cared what I was doing until I found comedy. And I suppose now, I do primarily think of myself as a comedian. Even promoting comedy is just really like a sort of a side gig. It's not sort of what I want to do. It's primarily the comedian side of it. Promoting comedy is more just a money-making a cash grab on the side, or just an excuse to do some gigs in Toowoomba and not have to drive to Brisbane and the Gold Coast every time. And also, I suppose, to give back to Toowoomba a little bit, because I do love this city, and I've spent so much time here. It's it's crazy. It always feels crazy to me when I go to other bigger cities and see some of the gigs they have there, and the sort of the type of entertainment they get to have. And I was like, well, why doesn't Toowoomba get this? So I just wanted to bring a bit of that here. But primarily, I think of myself as a comedian, because that's, I suppose, what it's the thing that I'm most passionate about. Really, work's just work. Like, it's just getting money to survive. Whereas comedy is what I do because that's sort of where I'm driven.
Your passion. It's a means to an end. So we're going to talk about growing up in this region in a minute. But before we started, you started to tell me that you actually had your own podcast. A couple of them at one stage. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I've had two podcasts, which I enjoyed both the experiences differently. I had the first one I had was years ago with a comedian, Bronwyn Cuss, who was from Ipswich and now lives in Melbourne. She was on the Melbourne International Comedy Gala this year. She's been doing quite well for herself down there. She's a killer. And it was called Not Backed by Science. And the premise, I think that's still up technically.
What was the title of it again?
Not Backed by Science.
Not backed.
Not. N-O-T, not backed by science.
Not backed by science.
Yeah. And it was an alternative healing and medicine. Like, we reviewed different types of alternative healing and medicine, like acupuncture, or we did I did the cryo tanks, or we did heaps of different stuff. Aura photography, that was a fun one with Mel Buttle. That was a good one. And so we'd get our great comedian guests along and we'd take them along to do it. It just became a very expensive podcast to do, because not only did you have to pay for yourselves to do it, you also had to pay for the guest comedian. And some of those therapies and stuff can be costing you $100 each. So $300 per episode was quite a pretty extreme production cost. But I think there's 50 odd episodes up there or something, maybe. It was just a lot of fun, really. It was a great way to try a bunch of stuff. And I think at first it initially came from the idea that I'm very cynical about all that sort of stuff, and Bronwyn was quite open to it. But I think in the end it became like we were sort of just finding out what people get out of these experiences and what keeps them going back, which was the interesting thing. And a lot of it was, I think, really always boils down to the same things we all really want, is like connection and intimacy. You just want someone to be paying attention to you, whether it's a psychic reading or acupuncture or something. You just want someone to be paying attention to you for half an hour. So that was really fun.
I don't think that you're allowed to be philosophical or as a comedian. I think it all has to be very upbeat. So did you change your mind about anything?
No, look, a lot of the things I still, some things I was like, oh, that's like the cryo tank. I thought that would just be I didn't think that would do much, but actually afterwards I did feel really good for a while. It does. And there's certainly other things, like acupuncture, I think, did nothing. Cupping did nothing. Just gives you those weird, I don't know, certain things that I was just like, this, I'm getting nothing out of this. But then I think, again, even the psychic readings, having been a person who's very cynical about all that sort of stuff, but the readings, I think I did enjoy. If I'm honest, I did enjoy them, and I did get something out of them. But I think it was just having, it's probably just slightly cheaper therapy, really, just having someone talk to you about your life for a little bit. So, yeah, I don't think I believe in any of it more or less, but I just saw the value in it differently.
Yeah. And was it done from a comedic side? Like,
Yeah.
were you sort of always half poking fun at it?
Yeah, look, I suppose initially my goal was to make fun of it all, but again, as I said, the further I got into it, the more I was like, oh, there is a reason that there is value in this to people, and so I didn't want to be making fun of the people taking part in it or whatever. I think the comedy just came from we had comedian guests on, and so we'd just be telling funny stories around different experiences and stuff like that. And with anything, there's always something funny. You know, with the psychic readings, for example, one of the psychics told me I'd meet the love of my life in October of that year at the Sit Down Comedy Club in Brisbane, and so it became a bit of like a sort of a slightly running joke where I was like, okay, well, let's check in and see how I'm going this October, and little things like that just you make. We wanted to. It started off probably being a bit punching down a little bit, like me wanting to make fun of people for buying into it, but then afterwards you go, oh, okay, there is value in this for everybody, and so it stopped becoming it very quickly became not really making fun of it, especially because some of the businesses that let us in, and like I remember the Salt Caves lady, when we told her we took the recording equipment in, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, we're recording a podcast while we're in here, and and then it became this thing where we're like, oh, she was worried we were going to make fun of her and her business, and I was like, oh, that's not what actually I want to do. I don't want to make someone feel bad about, their business. We just want to, try something different, a new experience, and laugh about it with our friends,
So what was the second one that you had?
The most recent podcast I had, which finished, was at the start of last year or something, it was called Car Crash. I don't think it's up at the moment, but I do want to get it back up online. It was 50-odd episodes, and the premise for that was it was a comedy intervention podcast where me and a good friend of mine, Jake Smith, who runs Good Chat Comedy Club in Brisbane, it was actually his idea. This premise after we did a tour in Cairns where it was sort of pitched to me as, well, there's no money in it for either of us. Let's just go up and have fun and drink a bunch of beers and get loose. And we did that. We got a bit carried away a couple of nights and made gooses of ourselves, for sure. But the premise he came up with after that was that in Cairns, I've realised that I've fallen off the comedy wagon and I wasn't taking it seriously enough, and I was doing a lot of stunts on stage, like taking off, stripping down to my undies and sculling beers out of shoes, and like silly things like that, which I don't know, at the time. Again, I saw some value in, but, it sort of it quickly becomes a bit of a crutch and stops being funny. But, it wasn't, early days, I don't think it was that silly. We just done it a couple of times and it was a bit of a joke. But, the premise of the podcast was initially meant to be quite a silly thing, like just an excuse for us to interview my comedian, my much more famous or bigger, or, some bigger name acts who are my good friends, and interview them about comedy and how to get better at it, and then also about life stuff. And a big part of it was we wanted it to be really, mostly me, I wanted it to be very honest and very vulnerable. So it was genuinely sort of me asking people I really look up to and respect what they think of me as a person, as a comedian, which... Yeah.
There's a theme going here, Nick. It's all about you. Is that right?
I think so.
I didn't tell you that this also is a therapy session.
Oh,
and
no.
I'm charging you the $300 an hour.
The room does have the feel of it.
And we're in the studio today, listeners, and we've got the doors closed, so it does have a little bit of a straitjacket theme about it. Nick, when I was doing some research for this podcast, for interviewing you, I thought, I'll just look up what are good questions to ask comedians, because I didn't want to... It's a bit like interviewing a rock star, you don't want to ask the lame questions all the time. Yeah. So I'll just read you out this, because it's quite funny. When interviewing comedians, top-notch candidate should exhibit an adaptable comedic approach. Be dubious of disrespectful and imperceptible candidates. Now, I don't know what that means, but I've got some more weird sort of questions
I don't know what any of that means.
So I don't know what any of that means. Can I start off with what's the most annoying question that people ask candidates?
I mean...
Comedians.
Yeah, comedians. I suppose always the classic is, tell us a joke. Or, how do you come up with your ideas? And it's... I don't think anyone... I mean, some people... That was another thing I learned from Car Crash. Everybody's got a very different method to getting to the end, to getting to what's funny. So, I mean, those ones are the very standard ones that, you get asked a lot. But the worst one is when you're at a party or something and someone introduces you as a comedian to someone that you don't know, their first, oh yeah, tell us a joke. And it's like, well, that's not how this works. There's no way in this context that anything I say is going to be funny. So they're probably the worst ones. But yeah.
Can you remember that first time that you thought, I'm really good at this. I can make someone laugh. You know, was it your mum or your brother, or you were always that person? And how did you view the class clown? Were you the class clown, or did you admire the class clown?
I think I was the class clown. I don't think it was. I was class clown. I think mostly just because I was bored. Like I found school quite boring, and I can't sit still that long and all that sort of stuff. So I think I became class clown material just to try and give myself something to do. I was just bored half the time, and I did love making people laugh and all that. And I suppose I grew up watching comedy on TV and all that, and wishing that I could do something like that, but also thinking that there's no way. I thought they're very special people. They must have some incredible skill that I'll never have, or that normal people don't have, and there's no way I could ever do that. And then it wasn't till I started, because I was sick of my job, my initial plan was to open up a comedy club or music venue in the main street, or in Margaret Street in Toowoomba. I think it was where there's a Filipino restaurant now. Filipino restaurant. I was going to open up a comedy club there a while ago, and while I was doing all the working out the financials, I worked out you couldn't just Google how much a comedian gets paid. You can't, because I was trying to work out how much it was going to cost me, and you can't do that. The only things that comes up is the two major management companies in Australia, two of the major management companies, Token and Century, kept coming up, and so I called them, and I remember asking, just as a hypothetical, how much would it cost me to get like Will Anderson or something up to Toowoomba for the weekend, like to do gigs? And they're like, no, it's not really how it works. You tell us what you can afford, and we'll tell you who you can get. And it's like, oh no, this is hypothetical at the moment. I'm not booking anybody. I'm just trying to work out what it would cost me, And so I started just going to different comedy shows, and I went to one at the Sit Down Comedy Club ran at Fibbers back in the day. It was a short-lived gig. It was a monthly one, I think. They only did it 3 or 4 times. And there was a lady there, Fiona McGarry, who runs a comedy course. I met her after the show. I was probably 10, 20 beers deep when I started talking to her, and she told me she runs a comedy course, and I transferred her the money for it right then on the spot. And then I spent, because she's not great at replying to emails, the next 5 weeks panicking that I've just been swindled out of $500. And then, but no, I did the course, and again, the whole way through that, I wasn't intending to do comedy myself, because again, I just had it in my head that it was a special type of person who got to do that, and it wasn't going to be me, And I just did the course just to find out more about how comedy works if I was going to run a comedy club. And then I got to the end of the course, and I remember getting up on stage for the first time, because at the end of the course you do a 5-minute performance at the Sit Down Comedy Club. Everyone brings all their friends and family, so it's actually probably the most generous audience you're ever going to get, because everyone's in a good mood. It's not a competition. Everyone just wants everyone to succeed. Fiona does a great job setting it all up. And so that was the first night I had a particularly good gig, that one. And I was like, you get that feeling of all that laughter, and you're like, I love this. This is all I ever want to do from now on. Like, I just want to chase that high. It is an addiction. So. Can
you remember some of that material that you used?
Yes, that first time. I had a bit about, a silly bit about Meatloaf that relied on me. Oh, no, sorry, that wasn't the first time. That was the second set that I wrote for something after. Sorry, no, my first set was about being mad at Scientology for ruining my childhood crush of Jenna Elfman.
Jennifer Elfman?
Jennifer Elfman. She was Dharma from Dharma and Greg.
Very specific.
It was very... Yeah, that was a very specific one. And then I had a bit about how my 5-year-old cousin Bridie was my nemesis because of some of the funny things she'd said to me just at dinner and stuff. She bullied me a couple of times, so that was always fun. I think that was, mostly it, yeah.
Tell me about, you're a Lockyer Valley boy, aren't you?
Gatton, yeah. Well, not Gatton born and bred, but we moved to Gatton when I was very young, when I was 5, and I went to school there. Why did your parents move there? Well, when we were in... We grew up in Sydney, and Dad was an engineer, and he designed brake parts, and Mum was a nurse, and the company that Dad worked for got merged with another company, and they got offered the choice for Dad to relocate to Melbourne or get made sort of redundant and paid out sort of thing. And I think I think Mum and Dad, when they'd met, Dad was from Sydney, Mum was from Queensland, and so they had the deal that, they'd do 10 years in Sydney and then 10 years up here, and so we moved up here. And then I think Gatton was meant to be a sort of more temporary stop, but then it just ended up being where we stayed. So I went to school for all 12 years there. Yeah.
And who else is in the family?
Mum, Dad, and my sister. I've got my sister Lauren. She's until recently was in the Navy in Perth. She's on the subs. She's, I think, just recently retired from the Navy, and she's got a job in the private sector. But
is she older or younger than you?
2 years younger. Yeah.
So any comedy or any laughs, or, were you aiming to always, do you remember as a kid, try and make your parents laugh or anything?
Yeah, I think I grew up in it, because Mum's got a big family. I think she's got 8 brothers and sisters or something, and they've all, so I was surrounded by them and the cousins, and I think it's a very typical Queensland upbringing of everyone in the family, everyone ribbing each other and, making jokes at each other's expense and being, stuffing around, doing silly things, so I think it was always around. Yeah, it was always around, yeah.
So, talking about growing up in the Lockyer Valley, were you sort of a kid who, had a really close group of mates and you concentrated on trying to make each other laugh? Or
yeah, definitely. Yeah. We spent every single day at lunch down at M Block, which was the home ec block at school. There was a sort of covered in table sort of just out the front of there. It was just the one table, and it was just me and I think 4 or 5 mates. We just spent every day there again, doing exactly that, just trying to make each other laugh. And one of my friends, Steve, he still lives in Toowoomba. He comes to all the comedy shows I do here. I think we've been best friends for 32 or 33 years or something at this point, and still very close mates, still trying to make each other laugh every night.
Yeah, it's that one person, I think, that if I can get them to laugh, I've done a really good job, because they're sort of so cynical or whatever. I'll just remind the listeners that you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, and we're on Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to comedian organiser, comedy promoter, Nick Carr. Now, Nick, I saw you on Saturday night. Most recently, you had a show here with Mel Buttle, which was absolutely fabulous, I have to say.
Yeah, it was good fun. Mel really crushed it that night. She really brought it home. It was good.
Yeah, so what makes it fire? Like, why does it sometimes fire?
Look, there's a bit of an art to it, to some degree. Having the right venue, good music, good lighting, all that plays a huge role. It's important because it's funny dealing with different venues over the time. People think that you can set up comedy in a lot of ways. You can have a lot of space. You can put up, like every venue wants to put tables in the room so they can sell food and all that sort of stuff. But you can't have anything distracting everybody. The vibe is so important to have everybody facing the right way. This sounds awful, but you got to treat people like sheep a little bit, in that you've got to pen them in, get them close up to near the front of the stage, get them all facing the same direction, and then no one feels. You really want people feeling safe and comfortable and like they're all in for a good time. If everyone's sort of spread out and vulnerable, feeling like sitting by themselves, then no one wants to laugh, because everyone's worried about, is anyone watching me laugh at certain things, or whatever. Whereas if everyone's in it together, then it's a team sport, and it makes it go really well. And I think the thing I'll say about Toowoomba, a lot of different places I've played in, you go to the Gold Coast or Brisbane, and there's some venues where it's usually pretty strong, and a lot of it has to do with demographics and what people are there for. Like, some people are just there for a night out, some people are there because they love comedy, and if they love comedy and they know what they're in for a little bit, it makes it a lot easier. Whereas I'll say this about Toowoomba, it's really refreshing, and that's why I kind of love doing these gigs, and it's made it easy because a lot of the comedians want to come back because they have such a good time, because the crowds there, even if they haven't seen a lot of comedy before, they've already decided they're in for a good night. Like, they want to have a good time. Like, no one's sort of trying to, we haven't really for a long time had any troubles with bad hecklers or someone trying to make the show about themselves or anything like that. It's always just, everyone just comes in because it's a Friday night and we want to, drink some beers and have a good time. And so that does a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, both of those shows, I think I opened up, because we did 2 shows on that night with Mel Buttle. Both of them, I opened up, and I don't think I wasn't really in the zone on either night because I was too busy worrying about everything. But the crowd was so behind it from the start. Everyone showed up so ready to have a good time. It just made the job very easy. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because we did have the discussion, because the seats were all it was all sitting down, all facing the stage, all sort of fairly cramped. And we did have a discussion. Surely you'd want people getting up and getting drinks and that sort of thing. But I understand what you're saying now about, if you've got them penned in and all facing the same way.
Yeah.
So, you look at things like Seinfeld, and I've been to the comedy a few times in New York, and they're all sitting at tables, and that goes against your theory?
Well, look, they're all... But you go to the cellar and, they've got the tables and that, but they all are packed in, facing the one way, lights are low, the stage lighting's proper. It's like, you can have those little tables, like they're fine, little so you can have your drink or have a snack or something like that, but no one's eating a big steak meal at the front, no one's chomping down, trying to, because then if it's a snack and you can reach your hand down without looking away, it works. If you've got to look and cut and do whatever, then it's just a distraction, and it takes them, it's so easy. I think because most people experience live entertainment as like a band at a pub or something like that, where you can still chat and you can walk around and it's not a big deal. Comedy, it's relies so heavily on concentration that anything that takes away from that can not only distract you from having a good time, but then distracts the people around you, and then that makes it noisy, and it's hard for the comedian to concentrate, because he's got to be the best. Comedy's always when the comedian's present and in the room. And not just doing you see people, you can see comedians when they're just doing a sort of doing a speech by rote, and there could be jokes in it, but it's not going to be that funny. It's always the best when they're in the room and they're watching and they're laughing. They're sort of, again, it's that team sport again. They're there with the people, and so anything that distracts anybody from that really just it just interrupts the magic of how it all works.
So talk to me about holding that crowd in your hand. Like you can feel the vibe. Lifting, and you can see, what's that like?
Oh, it is a drug. It's very addictive. It feels, I still in my life have not come across anything that feels as good as that. Like when you're in the zone and you've got them, it's power. It is power, and it is very, very rewarding in the moment. And then even for after it, you spend the rest of the night on an absolute high. But then when it doesn't go so well,
the lows Talk to me about when it doesn't go so well.
Well, the lows are pretty low. It is a roller coaster, because you can be on a real streak and you can have 2 or 3 gigs in a row that are going really well, and you can be really feeling it and feeling yourself.
Using the same material?
Yeah, same material. You just have a few on where you start getting the material to that right place, and you know it, you know how to make it work. And then some nights you just hit a random gig where sometimes it's your fault, you're just not in the right headspace, or you're too confident and you're not in it, or sometimes it can be, there's something else going on in the room, like as I was saying, someone's talking or something like that, and it throws the gig, and if you don't handle it the right way, and it's an art more than a science, like you can handle it a certain way 10 times, and then that 11th time or whatever, you try and do the same thing, and for whatever reason, because of whatever's going on in the crowd, they're not into it.
Have you ever had a crowd turn on you?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me what happens with that.
Oh, it's scary, because it sort of comes down to power a little bit. When you're going well and you've got this power, especially when you're hosting gigs, so you're emceeing a show, you're introducing the other acts, and you're sort of meant to be controlling the vibe and making sure that everyone feels safe and having a good time, and not giving people a structure that they can believe in. And I remember there was a particular time at the Avenue at the Gold Coast in Surfers Paradise, and it's a strange gig because it's a big room that should be great for comedy, but the back's not closed off. They just have a curtain, and then they have live music playing behind it. So there's noise at front, there's noise from the nightclub in the back, so you're kind of fighting a lot of different things. But when it's packed out, it can be, because it's a real demographic mix of people on holidays, locals just partying, people who love comedy, a real mix. And so some nights it's great. It's really fun if it's packed out and everyone's on board. And there was this one particular night, I remember there was, it wasn't the biggest crowd they had. I think it was State of Origin night or something. And so it wasn't the biggest crowd they had. So already a big empty room throws people off. It's just another thing that makes people feel that vulnerability. And then a group of young people I just started, and then a group of young people sort of came in and sat at the very front table, and took a long time to settle down, and so I was trying to just, let them, ignore them for a little bit, let them settle in, and they were just being so disruptive. And something that I often do on stage, and I know you've seen me do this before, where I will, I'll pick on somebody and be quite mean, but then I'll back down immediately, and I love playing that line of saying something crazy and then backing from it away, and they're still going, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you seem like a lovely person, just playing that back and forth. I really enjoy that, and I sort of went a bit hard on them at the start. I forget what I said exactly, but just for being a bit noisy. Like they were trying to order there because they were scanning QR codes to order, which is the craziest setup ever for shows. But and they were talking about that, and I was just like, I sort of went a bit hard on them too because I just needed to shut it down early because I thought if I didn't, it was going to become a problem. And they hated it, and one of them in particular took real offence and just like called me out on it pretty brutally, and then wanted an argument right then. So they'd been sitting down for maybe 2 minutes, and she was going me and like wanted me to apologise to a friend and stuff like that. And it got really. It was a fight, like a verbal fight, and it was awkward and tense, and like that was 3 minutes into the show. That's how the show started. We've still got 2 hours, and I've got to bring on 5 acts or whatever. It was very tense, and I had to just wade through it. And because that's the other thing about being the host, if you're just doing a spot and it goes badly, you can walk off stage, you don't look anybody in the eye, you just walk out, get in your car and drive home and never talk to anyone about it again, because we've all had those nights. But when you're hosting, you've got to keep going back up, and you've got to keep trying to steer the ship. And it was a brutal 2 hours because the other acts were doing fine. They were, and look, in a way, I was doing my job as a host, because as long as the other acts are doing, good, then but me having to keep coming out, like standing in a little sound booth off to the side, just sweating bullets, hating myself, hating my life, regretting every choice I've ever made, and then having to go back out there to a crowd that hates me every time. It was one of the worst experiences.
So were they able to get the rest of the crowd on board in their hatred of you, were they, do you think?
No, everyone else was just very tense, but they were a big table. They were a table of 12 out of probably a crowd of 30 or 40 all up. That's a pretty sizable chunk. And
that must have been so rattling.
Yeah.
So that sounds like your worst experience on stage. Can you think of your best, or is it always just if it's really going well?
Yeah, look, the first time was pretty big because that was the first time, the first hit of the drug, I suppose. It was like pretty mind blowing.
Anything really embarrassing, like breaking the microphone when you're hitting it on your head? A lot of comedians seem to do that.
I've hit it on my head. No, I've never broken the mic. I've damaged microphones and stuff like that.
You've never fallen off stage in a
No.
bit of beers. What about drinking while you're doing it? Do you do that, or is that just a bit of a look that you do, that you look as though you've...
Bit of both. Bit of both. I do. There's some of these Toowoomba gigs, because it's a home gig, and I have a lot of fun at them. Sometimes I do sort of go pretty hard, but a lot of the time it is sort of just a bit my character. I'll sort of only have one or two before I go on, and then it's just sort of part of I suppose the character of what I do on stage. But look, everyone's different. I know comedians who will only perform stone cold sober, and a lot of it's scary doing it sober. Like having a drink or two when does sort of take some of the edge off it. But I think everyone generally, once they get comfortable on stage sober, then it's probably when people are at their best. But I've also seen people do it stoned off their face or whatever, and do a great job. So
How do they remember where they need to go though? And how do you, even in general, how do you remember what comes next? You can see when you're watching comedians that they're going, yeah, you're a great audience, and sort of rubbing their forehead as you do, and then you can see where you're going to go to from here.
Yeah, look, it's weird because at high school, if you told me to memorise a 5-minute speech on something, I would have. There's no way. There's just no hope. I would have forgotten it all. There's no. And even now, I do some acting auditions, and it's 2 lines or something. And I can't remember one of them. It's weird. But for some reason, comedy or whatever, because I suppose it feels so conversational. Me personally, again, everyone has different things. Like I see a lot of comedians with notes written on their hands and stuff like that, and they'll have to look at that. If I'm doing an hour show, I'll have like a big, like my proper solo show. I'll have the list of jokes written out in order just off to the side, so that and it's more of a safety net, so it's like, oh, where am I going? Like I'm half an hour into this, what was next? Because the order's important. Then I'll sort of have a glance at that. But most of the time in any spot less than half an hour, I don't have a great. It's just because I love doing it and I remember the beats. I've never learnt my jokes word for word, which sometimes is inefficient and holds me back a little bit. But I've always just go, oh, okay, I know, I know this bit, and then after that I get to this bit, and I sort of just, I don't know, I just remember those bits, and it's easy because it's fun. Like I don't know, my brain remembers. It's like it's so much easier to remember a song you love that's 3 minutes long, you can remember every single word of that because it's the rhythm and there's different things to it. And then, but trying to remember, a 5-minute talk on, market fluctuations or something. Yeah.
What are the things that are off limits, do you reckon?
I do subscribe to the thing that I don't think anything's really off limits. Obviously certain really extreme things are very hard to talk about, but there is skills to it and intent's important, I think. Because you see all comedians all the time, people talk about getting cancelled and everyone's panicking about that or whatever, but I don't really think that ever actually really happens to anybody because so many of them are still doing it. They've still got audiences or whatever. Like, certain people won't listen to them anymore, but they've still got audiences. They still say what they... I think intent's a big thing because, like, I've seen so many great comedians talk about stuff that you're technically not meant to talk about, but they do it. And that's where the skill comes in. That's where there's art because you're making the people in the room feel comfortable enough to trust you that your intent's not bad. You don't have ill intent. I think that's the big thing. People talk about edgy stuff and whatever, and I have seen plenty of comedians do it where their intent isn't to be funny or to say something interesting or whatever. Their intent is I'm going to shock these people. I'm going to offend these people. I'm going to, and if that's what you're doing, you can't get away with saying, that's when the audience will turn on you because there's not that trust there. You've breached that trust. Whereas, yeah, look, I'm sure you've even heard me say some pretty, insane things on stage when I'm mouthing off. But again, it's meant to be silly. Like, it's not. And that's part of that character where I go back and forth on things, and I don't really, even on stage, I don't stand by anything I say, and that's an intentional. That's a considered move because you shouldn't. It's just me talking. It's just me trying to make people laugh. If I wanted everything I said in a speech to matter, I'd go to, I'd run for office or something like that. I'd take myself more seriously. But it's just comedy. It's just meant to make people laugh.
Well, I'll just remind the listeners we're with comedian and comedy promoter Nick Carr. You've just led me into one of my questions that I was going to ask because I like to cyber stalk anyone that I'm going to interview, and I got sucked into your Facebook page because you had a corflute with Nick Carr running for Toowoomba South for the Greens.
Okay, that's
now I know that was a mock-up and it wasn't true, but talk to me about you. Because I think even though you didn't run for politics, you are interested in politics.
Yeah, I am, and I think I'd like. I think in a lot of ways I'd like to, but it's one of those things. I think because I've got a life that I haven't generally taken myself too seriously. There's a lot of as much as politics is something that's very close. Something I identify a lot with now because I see things certain ways, and I would generally like to try and make the world a better place, and it does get frustrating just sitting on the sidelines and not really doing much about it myself. But at the same time, I think that if I had more time, I would try and get myself involved more with volunteering and stuff because I just know that I've got too much. It's too easy. You've only got to type 2 words into Google to find a video of me, with my clothes off, sculling, I think at one point I sculled beer out of a gumboot with a shot of rum in it, and we called it a rum booty. It'd be very hard for me to be taken seriously, I think. I mean, part of me thinks that maybe that's what, politics needs or whatever, is people with a past and a history that isn't, squeaky clean, just going, I've done some stuff, who cares? But
we've got the president of the Ukraine is a case in point. I won't say his name, Vladimir Zelensky. It's probably incorrect, but he was a comedian, and now he's president.
Yeah.
And I heard this morning that Russia loved the fact that he got elected because they thought, he'll be a clown, he'll be a pushover, he'll be a baby, and we don't have to take him seriously. And look where he is now. So there's hope for you.
There's hope, that's it. Yeah.
Tell me about, because you didn't have it on Saturday night with Mel Buttle, but you have the structure of having the amateur comedians. I suppose you're all amateur in a way, but people who are trying it out and seeing how they go with it. And we've seen some shockers with it's just so cringeworthy. How do you get them? Do they approach you or?
Look, a lot of them just come directly from the scene in Brisbane. I do on all my shows in Toowoomba. The one with Mel was a bit of an outlier because that was just her solo show, and she just wanted to do the 1 hour show, and we had the 2 shows on that night, so we couldn't really do the normal 2 hour format where we'd have a few comedians on and a break. They're always just a mix of other comedians in Brisbane and that are working. Some of them are, they're a mix of different levels of professional. Some of them are very new. I like to give locals a crack at it, so anyone who wants to do it can message the Down the Clown comedy page on Facebook or Instagram and hit me up. And they've had a few Toowoomba locals jump up over the times. Because it's something that everyone should be able to have a go at.
Do you see their show beforehand, or do you just say, how much time have you got, mate? Do you want 10 minutes?
Depending on a lot of the acts from Brisbane and the Gold Coast I know, so I know, like some of them I know are very new and whatever, I've seen them before, so I'll put them in certain spots for, certain amount. I'll only usually give them 5 minutes or so, and then some of the others will be good friends of mine who I've known for years and I know that know what they're doing, and I'll give them 10 minutes and they can, do a little bit of gold and a little bit of new stuff or whatever, depending on whether the spot's paid or not. If you're getting paid, the convention is to just do your best stuff. But then there's a mix of brand new people who haven't got a set, and so you've kind of and as you've seen some of the gigs, you've just got to give people a go and just see how it goes. And if they're not good, or if they not again that intent's wrong, if they're coming at it from the wrong direction, well, you just don't book them again,
So have any of those people come off, the really amateur ones, and just said, yep, I really killed that, or oh my God, I'm so traumatised by that, I'll never do that again?
I don't think I've really... I mean, I'm sure I have seen ones at like raw comedy competitions and stuff who've just never done it again, but they don't really stick out because you can tell that they're not... They hustle. I mean, most people... It is like an addictive thing, so most people, once you start it, you really want to keep going. But there are a lot of barriers to entry properly. Like, it's easy to get your first gig, and then once you want to step it up and be gigging more regularly and trying to get better, the barrier for comedy is just that it is stage time's limited, and bookers are careful about, and equality is the shows. You can't expect people to show up to a pure open mic and just get people trying it out for 2 hours, because that cringy feeling can be fun for 5 minutes, but after an hour of stressing people out, they're not going to come back. So you've got to have some sort of quality control, and so you can only ever really afford to have one or two of those brand new people on a show every time. And so that's kind of a barrier, because there's so many people that want to try it. So it's on everybody's bucket list these days, so everybody wants to give it a crack, and there's just limited time, especially in Brisbane and they say Toowoomba or whatever, Gold Coast. Like it's different in Melbourne and that, where there's a lot of rooms and people start at their own rooms, and there's 20 gigs on each night if you know where to go. But again, the quality varies quite considerably.
I'd have to argue with you that everyone wants to give it a go. It sounds like a living hell.
Oh, really?
When you talked about your early influences and you'd watch comedy, what did you watch?
The same thing. Like I always watched the Melbourne International Comedy Festival Gala. That was always a big thing, watching that as a kid. And it's really great now. Not that I'm at that stage, hopefully yet, but fingers crossed I'll get there one day. But seeing some of my friends and stuff that I've come up with or whatever doing that, like that Bronwyn Cuss that I did that first podcast with, she got to do that last year because she's doing some big things. And seeing someone like a good friend of mine live the direct, reach that, I don't think it's not technically the peak in Australian comedy. Like there's people who get TV shows and all that sort of much bigger things, but that's the sort of benchmark for when you've reached a certain level when you're doing the gala. And so seeing that's great. So I always grew up watching that, and I was really big into Jamoan and the cooking show with Bob Franklin, who I've gigged with Jamoan once or twice, but I've never really met him. Bob Franklin on that show is another Australian. Like I've gigged with him a bit over the years, and it's this crazy thing doing comedy. It doesn't take you long until you're working with your heroes, even if it is just you're on the opening spots, and that is another great part of that is because you're introducing people to, you're introducing the new people to they get to see the bigger acts on the same night. It's with music, you don't get to play with the big acts until you've really proven yourself over a number of years or, anything like that. Whereas you can be on a, especially if you're down in Melbourne where there's those big TV comedians trying new material all the time. I've been on shows where it's like Dave Hughes, Will Anderson, or, something like that all on the same night, and it's like, it's incredible because you're working with these people become your peers quickly, whether or not you're on the same level, but they become your peers pretty quickly, and it's always really fun.
I remember reading about, is it Fiona
O'Loughlin?
O'Loughlin,
yes.
And and her struggles with alcohol, and sort of because it was that lifestyle. It was, you know, you're on a high, you're all drinking afterwards in the bar, and how do you kind of go if you've got a family, or that's just something that you just have to work out?
Yeah, it's definitely harder for people with families. I've got again, but people make it work if you want to make it work, sort of thing. The partying and stuff I think has calmed down a lot over the years. Like, I think that when Fiona talks about those heydays back in the day, like. It's become sobriety's become a bit of a trend in comedy now. Like, it's become a bit of a thing that, which is, I don't know, wild to me, but it has become a bit of a thing that people are taking, because there is genuine. Like, I think back in those days, that Fiona's talking about, from what I understand, it felt like running away to join the circus. No one really knew where it was going to end up. There wasn't the structure that there is now to comedy. Now, with the internet and all these different opportunities and stuff, people take it. Like, the young people take it a lot more professionally than, it's not the rock star thing it used to be anymore. Now it is like, if you want to get somewhere, you've got to take it very seriously. Like, I know you're a fan of one of the young comedians, Anissa Nandala. Yeah,
I love Anissa.
Great. She's a killer. But and the reason she's so good, she's only a year or two in or something. Like, she's not that far in. The reason she's so good is because she's treated it as a very serious thing. From her very first gig, like, she shows up with notepads and she was asking all the other comedians for advice and writing down everything and taking notes and working on new stuff and working on the social media stuff that because that's the so she's built this huge following or whatever, and people are doing all these younger people are doing all these things to take it really seriously and professionally, whereas I suppose when I started, because I don't know, I didn't come into it with that intent. I probably have treated it a bit more with that rock star lifestyle. For me, it is fun. I do it because I love, having drinks with mates and stuff afterwards and that sort of lifestyle. But
you've got that mix of trying to have a business as well as being a comedian as well. Can we talk about Carl Barron?
Who can? Yes.
Yes.
I don't know much about him, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that ability to span generations, and our boys really love Carl Barron, always watching the YouTube. But I know I interviewed Kerry Saul, who was the general manager of the Empire, and he said that their best show was always, like the Carl Barrons or the Melbourne Comedy Club. So, do you think that comedy is evolving in any way?
It does change and grow. You definitely see trends in topics that people talk about. I think the core of it still remains the same. Like, people, I think, generally want to just hear, like, people want to hear comedians talk about stuff they relate to. So the stuff that's always going to hit best is, material about kids and families and stuff, and that's where I think those comedians with a family that do make it work have not an advantage, but like, it's good because they have something to talk about that is, as they're experiencing it, there's always new challenges and new events with raising a family or whatever. New things come up all the time, and it gives you... you're always filling the bucket up with material.
It's interesting, though, as a parent, I find watching women, particularly, talking about their kids, I don't find that very funny. I find that quite irritating. And I suppose most men then don't make comedy about their kids. But like, I was thinking about Carl Barron, and one of the source of his humour a lot is his father and his kind of Aussie iconic sayings and things. But my husband and I always have a discussion around, are female comedians funny? And there's not as many females on the circuit, though, is there?
There's not, because there's a lot of there's a lot of barriers to entry that make it harder for women, I think. Some of my favourite comedians are women. Like, I generally think that some of them are some of the best comedians. Like Mel Buddle, I think, again, is quite underrated in Australian comedy. Like, she's doing very well now, but I've been watching her for years, and her ability to edit on stage and to play with the crowd, and she knows what she's doing so well. It was amazing to watch her 2 shows in a row and see the differences on Friday night, and see how she played it slightly differently.
So tell me that. What did she do differently between the first show?
It was just, I suppose, the vibes were slightly different. The second show, as hot as the first show was, the second show was, even though it's technically a smaller crowd, were hotter because I think they'd had an extra hour and a half of drinking. Yeah. and so she went a bit looser and sort of went a bit further with some stuff and sort of cut stuff out of it. But yeah, I think Mel's one of the greats. There's another comedian in Melbourne, Bron Lewis, who's only very new. She's only been going 2 or 3 years, but she's killing it. Like she's blowing up. She's been Have You Been Paying Attention a bunch of times. She's hilarious, very funny. I think there's some great female comedians around. It is harder, I suppose, because it again is somewhat a male-dominated field. Men, I think, a lot of comedy is asking for favours, and you kind of, because there's so many people that want to get on stage, getting gigs is, until you get to a certain stage, is difficult, and so you're constantly asking people for favours. Oh, can you put me on? Can you put me on this? I'd love to be on this show, and you have to hit, and that is, I think, traditionally hard. It's sort of harder for women because they, whereas men are more.
Brazen.
Yeah, well, yeah, we've grown up in a system that rewards us asking for favours a lot more. That's how we've always done things. So I think there's those barriers. There is still, I think it's like anything. There's a level of there is some sort of danger in comedy for women. There are just anytime you get a group of people together trying to do something. Not everyone in comedy is a good guy. Not everyone in comedy is just there for comedy. There are people who do it too, like older men who have been doing it for longer who, through the way the dynamics of the scene work, are seen to have some degree of small amount of power, even if it is just within the context of the small scene in Brisbane, will still use it to try and, be sleazy and stuff like that. You see it a lot. So there are barriers. I think that's why you see less women in it, because there are just so many more obstacles in front of them that they've got to hurdle.
It's just so interesting that you would say, again, with the philosophy about men are used to asking and being a little bit more upfront about what they want and how to get there. Just before I'm going to have to let you go, tell me about, I know that you say that you'd like to be on the say the Melbourne Comedy Club list. What about like acting and that sort of thing? Is that an ambition? Or?
It wasn't really initially, and then I actually have an acting, I suppose a management company I'm with or whatever for TV commercials and that. I've been in one TV commercial, and I've auditioned for a lot of different acting roles now. I would love to get into it. I didn't think I would, but the small amount that I've done I quite enjoy. But again, it's hard to get. You're competing with so many other people who'd love to do it, because it's. I know it's hard, and I've never been like a proper actor or whatever, but the small things I've done, it's money for jam. So everyone wants to do it. Yeah.
Auditioning for the 4X Gold ad.
Oh, that was I've auditioned for a few different beer company ads. Why
do you think they're picking you?
Why
are they picking you?
Oh, to audition or to... I definitely fulfil a certain category. If you want a jovial, fun-loving, hefty guy to be drinking, beer in a camping chair or whatever, I'm a natural. I don't know if I told you this story, but I recently did an ad for a beer company where the brief was, so they wanted someone at a mate's barbecue. He's eating a sausage on bread in one hand. Someone hands him a beer. He spills sauce from the sausage on bread on his shirt. Can't work out what to put down to clean himself up, and so he just sculls the beer, and it's like, that was literally my weekend. That happens to me at least once a month. So I didn't get it.
I know how to do it. You didn't get it. Why didn't you get it?
I don't know. It was actually weird. I do know. I saw the one of the guys that owns the company at a wedding the week after I didn't get it, and when he got drunk, he kept apologising to me. And apparently, it's because I look exactly like their CEO. So and the CEO didn't. I don't know. That's what he told me. It could be bullshit, but
wow,
but yeah,
that sounds interesting. Now my time, unfortunately, has
right.
clicked down. It's been so much fun and so interesting. I've particularly loved how insightful you are about what you do.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's really lovely to hear. So my final two questions, of course, one is who's your favourite royal? Now, this person doesn't have to be living and they don't have to be British.
This is a hard question for me to answer because I am very much a Republican, and I hate that we live in a world where royal families exist. But I recently watched that movie, The Woman King. So maybe her. She was sick. That was cool. I don't think she was
what about the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
Song, oh man, there's a lot of I suppose, like, in a very cheesy, corny way, that I Write Sins Not Tragedies by Panic at the Disco. That's a very silly song that I love to dance to. Africa by Toto. You can't stand off. You've got to get in on for that one. There's
sure
a few.
Either of those two. Are you a dancing man? Do you love to
dance?
dance?
I love to dance. Yeah. One of my favourite things is dancing at weddings. That's just always so fun. Everyone's just having such a good time and in such a good mood. I love it. Yeah.
Well, we might catch you on the dance floor somewhere, Nick, but our time has run out, and I thank you for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk. It's just
Thanks for having me, Megan. Yeah, cheers. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.